And for more on this situation in Iraq, we're joined now by Sami Hamdi, the editor-in-chief of the Interest, a United Kingdom-based international magazine. Sami, a very good evening to you. Sami is a commentator on the Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Sami, we understand, according to the reports, that the violence is centered around Baghdad and the south. What can you tell us about the information you're getting?
I think it's important to highlight that the violence that is taking place are essentially between two groups, both who have always been under the umbrella of Iran, both of whom have always been supportive of one another in terms of propping up the government, in terms of maintaining Iran's influence, two groups that have always been sympathetic to Iran, and the fallout in this violence is more the result of Iran being unable to mediate between its allies in as efficient a way as it has done in the past. It's important to remember that Muktada al-Sadr, who came first in the last elections, who expected to be prime minister, the reality is that he's not going against Iran. What Muktada al-Sadr is doing when he's competing with his with his rivals is not to go against Iran, but rather to lash out against Iran and to say to Iran, look, I want to rule this time. And it's important to put this into context in that in 2010, Moqtada al-Sadr went to war with his rival, then Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. And then when the crisis got too much, Iran called Moqtada al-Sadr to Qom, to Tehran. They talked with Moqtada al-Sadr, and Moqtada al-Sadr returned to Baghdad and propped up Maliki's government and joined the coalition. In 2014, when Haider al-Abadi became prime minister and Moqtada al-Sadr again clashed with his rivals, again Iran spoke to him, they mediated with him, and for the sake of helping to maintain Iran's influence, he joined that particular government. What Moqtada al-Sadr thought was that given that he came first in the elections, he thought that it was his time to rule. He believed that Iran would acknowledge him and give him his turn in the same way that he was made to give Nouri al-Maliki and Haider al-Abadi their turns before, when Iran demanded or insisted that they become prime minister. But instead, he found that the Iranians were not necessarily keen on his premiership and preferred instead to pressure him to try to appoint another prime minister of their choosing. And Muqtada al-Sadr, when he essentially tried to dig his heels in, what we're seeing is this grand disciplining of Muqtada al-Sadr from Iran. It's a disciplining of Muqtada al-Sadr from Iran and its allies. And this is why Muqtada al-Sadr has resigned his post. This is why he's announced once again that he's withdrawing from politics. The 9th time he's made this announcement in the last decade. He's announced that he's withdrawing because for Muqtada al-Sadr, when push came to shove, he still values Iran's role in Iraq. He values Iran's influence. He's part of this umbrella in Iraq in terms of preserving Iran's influence over the Shi'ite parties. And what we're seeing is not necessarily a revolution in Iraq, but rather a clash between rivals, particularly between Muqtada al-Sadr and between Nouri al-Maliki, both of whom want to appoint their own prime ministers, and which Iran has essentially barged in and said to both of them that Tehran is the one that will choose, Tehran is the one that will mediate, Tehran is the one that will negotiate it, and Muqtada al-Sadr will not be allowed to impose himself on Iran.
Sami, let me just jump in there.
In terms of the killing.
Let me just jump in there and ask this question, because you have pointed that it was per Sadr's expectation that it was his turn to rule, to govern. He has played quite a significant role, as you've pointed out, in the country's political dynamics over the past couple of years. Did he have a legitimate expectation in your view?
Moqtada al-Sadr in previous governments, not just the past 2 years, but over the past decade, has had a number of ministers. He's been a key part in propping up this system and maintaining it. In the past 2 years, Moqtada al-Sadr sought to rebrand himself as a nationalist, as somebody who is interested in Iraqi concerns, with some of his supporters chanting Iran, barra barra, Iran, out, out. And Moqtada al-Sadr sort of rode the popular discontent towards Iran's role in Iraq to sort of try to present himself as the lightning rod out for the revolution, to present himself as the revolutionary candidate. And when he entered the elections, he entered on a broad coalition that included leftists, communists and the like, trying to present himself as a nationalist leader as opposed to a very Shiite leader that leans more towards Iran. And he came first place. But when he came first place, he found that he still did not have enough seats in order to form a majority, and he struggled to form a majority with the Kurds and with the Sunni groups. And as a result, Iran's allies, Iran's Shia allies, when they dug their heels in, Muqtada Sadr was unable to find the support to shift them or even to push them back. And as a result, they essentially thwarted all of his efforts to impose his own prime minister. They thwarted his efforts to impose a government, and they essentially laid out a very clear condition to Muqtada Sadr, which is that what matters is our influence, is our Shia party influence, not your right to rule. Tehran and we have come to an agreement that you should not be the one to rule. It's not your turn to rule. You have to come back and toe the line. And Muqtada Sadr has spent the past 6 months or 7 months essentially trying to resist this pressure of towing the line. And what we've seen over the past few days in these clashes is Muqtada Sadr being humbled, essentially being defeated by Iran and its allies, being forced to go back and toe the line, being forced to withdraw from politics and to allow Iran to reassert itself once more. And the biggest body blow to Muqtada Sadr was that one of his uncles or one of his relatives, Sadr being one of the big religious schools of thought in Iraq, one of his relatives, who is considered a titan in this particular religious school of thought, resigned his post and called on his followers to follow Tehran, to follow Khamenei, essentially saying that I am withdrawing my support from Muqtada Sadr, I am withdrawing my support from my relative, and Iran should be the point, should be the influence that you guys should be following instead. And Muqtada Sadr soon resigned after that, or essentially announced his resignation from politics. So, but the point here is this is not about a popular revolution. This is about rivals who have agreed to uphold a system that the people of Iraq detest. And when Muqtada Sadr wanted to be the leader of this particular system, his rivals and his co-conspirators, call them what you will, they essentially came and said, no, we will not follow Muqtada Sadr. Muqtada Sadr must follow us. Muqtada Sadr got upset. He tried to push back, and in the end he was forced to toe the line, and he is the one who appears to be the defeated party.
So what do you predict over the next couple of days? Just looking at the violence itself, I believe even in Nasiriyah, following Sadr's supporters' attacks on what are said to be Iran-aligned military forces, their premises. How big is it going to get? Will it get out of hand? The balance of forces, where does it lie?
When Donald Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most prized general and the one who successfully navigated the sensitivities between Iran's allies in Iraq, it was said that Iran's influence was weakening in Iraq and that Iran was becoming weaker. But what we've learned from this particular episode is that Iran is as strong as ever, and that the popular mobilization force that helped to drive out ISIS from Iraq and then incorporated all the militias, acted as an umbrella that legitimized Iran's militias in Iraq. It's become clear that this is a very potent force, stronger perhaps than even the Iraqi army, and that they are the dominant power, they are the dominant force. The point here being is that it's abundantly clear that Iran is firmly in control in terms of the proceedings that are unfolding in Iraq. And this means that what is coming is not necessarily more violence, but rather a dialogue, a discussion. Muqtada Sadr has hinted now that he's already resigned from political life, but that doesn't mean that he's out of political life. There's talk now of backdoor negotiations to try to restore some of the lack of trust, to try to restore some of the trust, to try to restore some of the relationship with Muqtada Sadr. Iran is not hard-hearted when it comes to its allies. It seeks to ensure that there is unity between its allies. There will be dialogue between the Shiite parties. There will be dialogue over who should rule. There will be dialogue as to how to protect this system that the Iraqi people tried to bring down in a revolution in 2019 and 2020. There will be talk about how to preserve their influence, how to cut the slice of cake, the Iraqi slice of cake, to make sure that it is Iran that dominates and its allies, to ensure that the Iraqis are not allowed to go to an early election, to ensure the Iraqis do not have a say, and to maintain this system that has become a burden on the Iraqi people as opposed to a salvation.
Sami, let's leave it there for now, but I'm sure we will continue chatting about this. Thank you so much. Sami Hamdi, the editor-in-chief of the Interest, a United Kingdom-based international magazine. He's also a commentator, Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan and Pakistan.